Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Waste Management on the Local Market in 2022, organized by British Romanian Chamber of Commerce. I'm delighted to make the opening remarks on behalf of BRCC as the events manager for this event. And I would love to thank our keynote speakers for accepting our invitation today to discuss this very important topic for our community, and especially in this context. As you might have noticed, we've been a very big promoter of sustainability in the last years. This is not our only event or initiative towards this topic. We're going to have many initiatives and events throughout this year, both online and offline, both in Romania and the UK. So stay tuned. We're planning a lot of interesting discussions with experts such as today, and we're going to have very interesting topics to be discussed. Before we start, I would like to introduce Cătălin Gugiu, Sustainable Investment Manager at London Stock Exchange, Romania, who will be moderating today's discussion, and who's not only our moderator, but he's been for a while now our coordinator for Coaliția pentru Dezvoltarea României. On this occasion, we would like to thank him for all the support and help from the last year and to his continuous active involvement in the BRCC. Thank you, Cătălin. The floor is yours. I'm very curious to learn more about our keynote speakers today.
Thank you for the nice introduction, Anna. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today to discuss about a topic that now seems to be on the minds of governments and corporates alike, which is, of course, sustainability. And more specifically, today we will talk about waste management and the circular economy. Before we get into today's topics, a bit of housekeeping rules. Each of our guests will have approximately 10 minutes for their presentations, and they will take questions after everyone has presented. You may enter your questions in the Q&A chat box or the regular chat box, and we will address those at the end. Speaking to us today, we have Ms. Cleopatra Leahu, a partner at Suciu Popa and Associate Attorneys at Law, who will be talking to us about legal instruments for transitioning to a circular economy. We have Mr. Damien Thery, Managing Director at Ateliere Fără Frontiere, who is going to speak to us about environmental and social impacts of the circular economy. And last but not least, Mr. Raul Pop, Programs Manager at Ecoteca, who will be speaking to us about trends and emergencies for waste management in Romania. With that being said, Cleopatra, the floor is yours.
Hello everybody, and thank you for having me today as a speaker. So because I'm the opening speaker today, the purpose of my presentation would be basically to provide a brief overview over the concept of circular economy that most of you are familiar with, and how it has been incorporated into public policy so far, and also to discuss which fundamental changes are expected in the near future, particularly in the waste management field, in order to make this transition happening for Romania. Let me attempt to screen share. Okay. So going to the circular economy concept, in brief, it represents a system with a zero waste purpose in which products would maintain their functionality throughout long life cycles, and their components would preserve their value and be reincorporated into economy, therefore never become waste. As it follows, the circular economy is associated with both raw materials and waste, being basically a transition from the current cradle to grave perspective to what would be a cradle to cradle perspective. Also, it goes beyond improving what we know as current waste management system, being associated with a design for effectiveness of products and processes. Finally, there is a focus on the consumer's role. Consumers are not viewed only as a weak party that must be basically protected from abusive commercial practices, and as they were traditionally seen as the main target of the product supply chain, but they become an informed party, being actually the starting point of the reverse supply chain, which means actually a movement of goods from the consumer back to the producers. The European Union has had a leading role in advancing public policies on circular economy. And it also identified some key product value chains that are currently the basis of circular economy. And here we are talking about electronics and ICT with the purpose of addressing specific inefficiencies of this type of products, like software update or hardware, and we can think of chargers or batteries. Batteries are also becoming increasingly relevant, not only because what we know as electromobility, but also due to their significant eco footprint in terms of waste management. We also have packaging that must be addressed both in perspective of reduction, considering the current overpackaging, and also in terms of efficiency of recovery, since packages must be designed in a way that allows reuse and recycling. Plastics, for which you already have an EU strategy, and we all became, at least in the last year, familiar with reducing single-use products like plastic straws. Textiles, constructions, and buildings that currently account for 50% of extracted materials and over a third of the waste produced, and food waste. The approval of such strategies is a good indicator of policy priorities. However, only specific projects can really determine a swift transitions. And one of the instruments to achieve that is the law, meaning a regulatory approach that determines a chain of duties to all the parties in the process. And here we are thinking from the consumer, the producer, the operators involved in waste service management activities, and the enforcing authorities. Romania has tried to keep up with those strategies, and for instance has adopted its national waste management plan and also the plans for the 41 counties and Bucharest municipality. However, the results are yet to be seen. According to Eurostat data, recycling in Romania is 5 times less than the European average. Also, the Romanian state is currently facing several infringement procedures from the European Union due to failure to close illegal landfills, to urban wastewater treatment issues, or to weak results on separate waste collection. The first instrument which is currently available to address at least a portion of this is the recovery and the resilience mechanism. We all hear about it quite often as being a financial instrument, which, although it has its main purpose to provide support to the member state to meet the challenges and the economic consequences of the pandemic, it also has a series of measures that are aimed to facilitate the implementation of the circular economy. And for this type of projects, it would be possible to obtain financing and administrative and legal support. The Romanian plan has been approved recently by the EU Council last fall, and has a component called waste management, which includes or covers these areas through 3 main investment lines. It basically includes a reform aimed at improving waste management governance and also accompanying investments For instance, only for municipal waste management system, the amount available under this facility would be of 956 million euros. The key component of that in terms of law, it's related to improving waste management governance. That would be the instruments to accelerate the transition. And as far as the components that would be adopted in the upcoming future for improving waste management, first we are talking about the National Circular Economy Strategy, which would be crucial for obtaining financing and funding for this type of project, and also for monitoring the progress of the transition through specific milestones. The strategy would be followed by the action plan, which shall define the key implementing steps, and also by the entry into force of the actual enactments that would consolidate compliant waste management in Romania. As far as the relevant enactments are concerned, it would be the Ordinance on Waste Regime, which will implement and apply the extended producer liability, and it will always have penalties for things like illegal landfilling, waste dumping, and open air burning, things that represent issues that each of us can smell, can feel every day. And in terms of penalties, one of the, let's say, unfortunate but objective factors is that as long as the sanction is lower than the cost for compliance, people will always choose to be incompliant. Another thing would be related to increasing the reaction of the authorities that are in charge with enforcing those regulations. And here we would have the amendment of sanitation law and of order 109. The aim being that instruments such as pay-as-you-throw, landfill tax, or extended producer responsibility became operational. And that is important because there is one thing to have a sanction in a law, and another thing, the fact that it is really applied. In terms of compliance, and that's a general comment on law, discouraging incompliant activities, it's not always related to the amount of the fine, the sanction, or the penalty that can be applied, but more or less with the certainty of having that penalty enforced. And as another and maybe last element of my presentation, aside the regulatory government decisions and ordinances that we would expect in the coming year, we should also see a series of administrative enactments being actually related to the activities of the local councils for updating zoning plans. As for all those collection centers and eco islands and waste recycling facilities that are planned to be created in Romania, you would need also the framework coming from the administrative decision makers. So in a nutshell, that were the key elements I wanted to present to you today. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you very much for the insightful presentation, Cleopatra. I'm sure you'll have some questions at the end. Moving on to Damien. You are on mute, Damien.
Indeed, thank you very much, Cătălin. Thank you very much to the British Romanian Chamber of Commerce for the invitation. I'm very happy to present our point of view on this very important subject, and we'll focus on environmental and social impacts of the circular economy. Just like a brief overview. 50 years ago, we used to need one planet for the consumption and the production of humanity. Now we are closer to 2 planets. That applies to everybody on the planet, but is the same average for Romanian citizens today. And an example, when we purchase today an 11 kilogram TV set that is being built, wherever it's built, probably in China, transported to our home, and we're happy to switch it on, we need 2.5 tons of materials mobilized for this TV set. We need to change the system. We used to know the linear economy. We switched, like in the 80s, to recycling economy. Recycling is not the solution. So now we need to move to circular economy, meaning that reuse, refurbish, repair, repurpose, rot for bio-waste is a key in order to not overuse resources on the planet. And this is where Atelier Frontier is activating. In the meantime, we talked about resources. In the meantime, on the social side, when we work on waste, if you see here textiles, we need up to 35% to treat, to reuse 1,000 tons. If we talk about furniture, for instance, we need 75%. And for electronics, 140 jobs will be created by reusing e-waste. And altogether, only in Europe, if we recondition 1% of all the products, we create 200,000 jobs. These jobs are easy, repetitive, simple, suitable for vulnerable people, with no qualification needed. And we think they should be focused on this activity of reuse for work integration social enterprises, so that our society would be more inclusive and green. So this is where Atelier Frontier comes into the equation. What we do first is a social project. We give a second chance to marginalized people who have got no chance to work. For instance, here is Maria, who works in one of our tuning workshops. A lot of our employees have never worked before, and we give them a chance for a 2-year period. These persons come from various backgrounds. As you can see on the top left, domestic violence, school dropout, homelessness, Roma, human trafficking, addiction, etc. And after 2 years within our workshop, they are back into the conventional job market. For this, we do have social assistance, and we help with a wide range of social difficulties that our beneficiaries can have. In order to give them work as a test, and this is where circular economy is at the heart of our activity, we set up some workshops over the past 14 years. The first one is EduClick. We collect waste electrical and electronic material. We also collect lamps and anything that's got batteries and anything that's got an electric plug. We can collect fridges, ovens, or anything. We focus more on IT&C. We do refurbish, recondition mainly desktops and laptops, which we donate further to schools. We equipped more than 10% of all the schools in rural areas of Romania, thanks to reconditioned computers. This program, EduClick, so has got a social component, educational component, and of course, environmental component. Our second workshop, Remesh, is a sewing workshop whereby we collect advertising banners, the big banners that we can see in the streets, made of reinforced plastic, which is very damaging for the planet. At the moment, there is no solution for these banners. So either we put them in the earth, and that's very bad, or we burn them, and it's even worse. So at least we give them a second life by transforming these products into home and deco products, such as bags and so on. Our third workshop is a social farm based 30 kilometers north of Bucharest, where we produced eco-certified vegetable. And here too, circular economy is key because we talk about bio-waste collecting and transforming into compost so that any bio-waste can be reused in our earth. So let's look now at our impacts overall. Looking at the SDG Sustainable Development Goals angle. There are 17 of them. We activate in all of them, but let's focus on 8 where even more active. The first one is no poverty. Last year we created 19%, they went back into the conventional job market. Again, back on circular economy, thanks to the workshop that we have that have also environmental impacts. So 19% got back into working to, let's say, normal companies. Second activity on the SDG side is on the zero hunger. We produce a lot of vegetables, amazing vegetables that we deliver to Bucharest, not using any plastic, using reusing any baskets made of carton. So the CO2 impact of local farms, the farm to fork strategy that is at the EU level at the moment is huge and is the future of agriculture for the planet, basically. So we think that our model is definitely functional and useful for everybody. So anybody, I take the opportunity, anybody interested in eating a good vegetable is happy. I'm happy to be contacted and then we can deliver them home in Bucharest. So I talked about our donation program. Last year we reconditioned nearly 4,000 computers, which were further donated to more than 100 schools in rural areas of Romania. We've got a bit more than 30 jobs, open jobs, anytime, green jobs in the circular economy sector. This more the social aspect. We're opening now what is called in Romanian Unitate Protejată. So it's a sheltered unit which hires persons with disabilities, and we can work for, let's say, reserve purchases for big companies who don't have the right quota of persons with disabilities. They've got facilities, and then we are a provider thanks to mainly our sewing workshop we can produce for these big companies. On the responsible consumption and production, as an authorized collector, we do activate, obviously, mainly as much as we can in reusing. Sometimes we do collect some very old products that go in the recycling, let's say, chain in Romania. Here, an appeal too, in case you've got some equipment, do not hesitate to contact me. We're happy to take care of it and give it a second life whenever possible. Climate action, we organize all sorts of events. Here is at the farm, here with the French ambassador. But as much as we can, we communicate about all our actions, and we're happy today to talk about what we do, hoping to make, to disseminate. Climate change, the main thing is that we at least all need to be aware of what's happening, and that it helps further us and the planet. We are involved in all sorts of partnerships at European level with Norwegians. At the moment, we are running 4 European projects, and we're also a member of Reuse, it's at the bottom right, which is an international network for social enterprises activating in repair and recycling, and mainly in textile and waste electrical fields. And for activities, we are visible at the national level. Last year, there were some prizes given, and this year too. Left-hand side, I think you can recognize Colin Lovering at the Diplomat event. Beginning of this year, we won 2 prizes at the Green Report for Circular Economy and Agri-Food. We're very, very happy about this. At a European level, as Cleopatra was mentioning, it's becoming a hot topic, and we can see it through the exposure that we get in our activities in the past few months. And that's it for our activities. Happy to collaborate. Here is our team. Do not hesitate to contact me for any further question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Damien. It was very insightful. I especially appreciated towards the end of the presentation where you linked all your activities towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think one question for you at the end of these presentations would be what we can do more at individual level to actually serve the achievement of those goals. So that's something for you to think about. And we move on to Mr. Raul Pop.
Hi, Katalin. Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. I start by apologizing if you hear a background music. To my excuse, I'm in an Irish pub. To my excuse and your envy. And I just hope that my connection will be as stable as the music surrounding. Thank you very much for your exposure. If Mrs. Leahu was high level describing on what to expect next, and Damien was showing us how to build actually the resilient and sustainable solutions and society you want to live in. If you just take their model and scale it up, will make a huge step forward. I will try to focus a little bit more on the, if you want, the legislative and the priority actions that will follow, especially based on the compliance things we have to observe. And also, of course, extra voluntary thing, it's always welcome, but let's focus on what's going to cost us directly, because I would expect that to be an easier thing both to understand and to sell internally and to your stakeholders, and not the least, maybe also to the government. Thank you, BRCC, for having this task force and being consistent in discussing these topics. Please count me in whenever I can help. In today's let's say landscape, I'm quite close to whatever comes with the resilience plan, national circular economy action plan, and the new developments, especially regarding plastics. As you know, we all move under this big umbrella of the Green Deal, which is based on several quite new concepts. If you want to talk about the way we have adopted, actually, we have adopted them actually. Other than that, it's quite they've been around quite for a while, such as the circular economy, climate change, all these big topics. Our main challenge now is to take it from the theoretical sphere and put it into daily actions. And because of that, we kind of need a predictable legislative environment to move in, which for the time being is quite a challenge. We know that all these major policy directions come through ministries and then through all sorts of authorities and agencies. They are quite reactive and move most frequently only because of some infringements or infringement threats, which is not necessarily helping the private sector or the society as a whole. I just had a discussion today on some topics that are quite stringent in Romania, but by the authorities, they are postponed until some next level or some next, let's say, versions of the European directive will be adopted, which means that we'll always be like five years behind. We know that the European directive adoption goes through a quite long process, then the transposition goes through another long process. We always transpose it at the end of the transposing period or sometimes even afterwards. And generally transposition, it's a mere translation. And then we have to go back and reinvent or invent some mechanisms for these things to actually happen in the real world. Right now, me personally, I see a risk, if you wish, in this discontinuity of the public policies. As you probably have noticed, especially the ones working in Romania for quite a while, every single time when you have a political reshuffling of any sort, pretty much everything stops, goes back to zero, and we have to start all over again. And when it comes to environment policies, where we had like on average, less than one minister per year, this comes at a huge expense of putting together a consistent strategy or multi-annual plan and stuff like that. Right now, in the area of waste management, which is related to circular economy, albeit as Mrs. Leahu said in the beginning, they are quite opposite, because if you have a circular economy, you don't have waste, therefore no need to manage it anymore, but you have to manage the way it works so you don't have this waste. We are not very advanced in that, although we have quite a few easy to understand successful examples. But coming back to the public policies, especially in the area of circular economy. This was also a question in our chat. Right now, I'll be very, let's say, clean in saying that nobody is assuming it at the political level, at the public policies level. Although circular economy some were mentioned in between the attributions of the Ministry of Environment, in real life, there's not much happening, neither at the Ministry of Environment or Ministry of Economy or any other ministry that you would think would be involved. That's why I think the private sector and its different shapes and forms of getting a common voice and putting the topics on the table in front of the central authorities. So the public sector is extremely important and probably one of the few actors that can provide some sort of continuity in between different governments and political reshufflings. That's why, again, BRCC is doing a great job, and please do that and do it more. So right now, of course, I'm very familiar with the waste management chapter in the National Resilience Plan. I wrote it, so I have some background on it. I'm expecting, as interested as you, our colleagues, the way that it will be instrumented through the financing guidelines, which are going to come at least from 3 directions. One of them is the Environment Fund, who's taking over especially the state aid scheme for recycling. The other one is the ministry itself, who's taking over all these investments for collection, which are aimed in supplementing the local infrastructure. Therefore, they are directed towards local authorities. And there is also a third direction, is a special unit within the Ministry of Environment that handles only the manure, the waste coming from zootechnical activities, breeding animals. So these 3 sources of enlightenment should publish these guidelines, so it will be easier, or we can start actually putting together business plans and applications to access these funds. I'll be happy to answer questions on the National Resilience Plan, but before that, I definitely need to mention a couple of other subjects which are of high priority as we speak. You probably have seen in the public arena a lot of discussions about the deposit return scheme, the deposit return system, which is something that the ministry is struggling with for the past 3 or 4 years. Right now is, in theory, close to having a strong legal base, if you want, for the system to be set up. I'm a little bit less optimistic than that, because there are some things in this legislation, that these legal acts which are going to defer a little bit the advancement on this process, such as, for example, the minister has decided on the very last discussion that before passing this particular piece of legislation, that the state will be involved with a 20% shareholding stake in this new entity, but nobody has managed to clarify what does that actually mean. And me personally, I'm expecting to have all sorts of, let's say, struggles in terms of the legal aspects of this setup. We'll see that unveiling in the next couple of weeks. So I would say that by mid-March, we'll see if this will go as planned or is going to be deferred for another, let's say, a year. The other topic, which seemed to be a little slower, but it actually catches up, it's the plastic tax, the way it's called, is the money that Romania has to pay to the European budget for every single kilo of plastic packaging that hasn't been recycled, which is going to come as a shock especially for the private sectors, the one who are putting the plastic packaging on the market and are not able to recycle the 100% of it because of various reasons. One of them being, of course, the lack of infrastructure and the very slow advancement made by the local authorities in collecting plastic. The other factor being the fact that most of the plastic packaging will not be included in the deposit return scheme. In this particular setup that is right now, where they are able to collect someplace around 40% of the plastic placed on the market, which means it's still out there and Romania has to pay for it, altogether about 180 million euros per year. Money that right now is the Romanian budget. And I expect that during the month of April or May at the latest to be transferred to the producers through a new piece of regulation. And not least, equally as important, but probably not as stringent, is the single-use plastic policies, which have been transposed quite recently, I think in October, if I'm not mistaken, but still lacks some second-level legal clarifications in terms of the way it has to be reported, the way it has to be assumed as a target by any specific company, and how much that would actually cost. I would stop to these few pointers, but I would like before that to answer some of the questions that we have already received, and which I have promised that I will answer in my intervention. Let's see if I can still find them. It's in Q&A. Okay. We were asked if Romania has made any progress closing the illegal landfills. Yes, it did. It has, because it still has a lot of them still to cover. But just to give you a little bit of a background information, every single one of them has a particular legal and especially property setup, which has deterred the state to just go ahead and close all of them. I think right now we have about, out of the 48 that were left in the fall, now probably we have about 20 which are still under an analysis on finding out the ways to go ahead and close it. It doesn't have anything to do with technology. It has everything to do with public money being spent on other people's property, which is illegal. So therefore, it needs a lot of clarification in terms of the property regime of these particular landfills. Somebody has asked if Romania has any energy from waste incineration plants. As of today, there is none for municipal waste. The cement factories take over some a bit of the fractions that result after the sorting of municipal waste, mainly plastics. Of course, for the waste coming from industrial or agricultural activities, there are other solutions. Some of them also imply incineration, as well as for all medical and hazardous waste. Of course, in my view, there is room there for increasing the capacity. We have never had enough capacity for neutralizing the hazardous waste, and now with the pandemic and everything, that has been revealed even more. Let me see. Why has Romania turned into a legal dumping ground for EU waste? It's simply, the question, and the answer to this question is very simple, because it's cheaper to bring it over to Romania than to handle it at its origin. And I'm talking especially in the countries where landfilling or even burning is expensive, and Romania still has to enforce its capabilities of stopping this phenomenon in catching all these fraudulent activities, and not least having stronger penalties for that. The disconnect between taking action and implementing circularity principles, I mentioned it. I think, in my view, there are a lot of things happening in the private sector, close to nothing happening in the public sector in terms of legislation or even reduction policies with the local authorities and stuff like that. We do have quite a few pieces of legislation, but for the time being, they are not strongly enforced. For example, the green procurement rules, or the plastic tax has not come into effect yet. And even if it comes into effect, it's going to be delayed in terms of creating any sorts of impact at the municipality level, for example. And I will stop here. Probably also there are some other questions that that might be addressed by our co-panelists.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the question regarding the incentives that the companies have at this moment. Let's say at this period of time, companies have what would be indirect incentives to get involved and help in this process. So we are talking a lot about voluntary compliance and CSR projects for which you would have the fiscal incentives like those derived from the sponsorship law. And you would also have those actions that come from their stakeholders. If there are companies and more companies in the energy sector, for instance, having their shareholding structure as indirect shareholders, bodies like European Investment Bank and EBRD, there are strict standards for getting finance or getting this type of shareholding, which are related to environmental standards and indirectly to circular economy. And another important component, at least at this moment, comes from the actual consumer and the change that we are starting to see in people's mindset about healthy circular consumption habits. I'm thinking of the producers, for instance, in the textiles industry that implement more and more of this type of projects. Also, I've seen recently as efforts done by producers. For instance, one of our clients is a company involved in cardboard production that receives more and more requests from its clients for efficiency design and for providing those type of packaging that have also elements allowing for easier recycling and reuse. So that would be my comments on that question.
Thank you for the clarifications, Cleopatra, and thank you, Raul, for your very insightful speech. We have another few questions here in the Q&A box. The first one would be, does Romania have at the moment the necessary technology and knowledge to ensure the implementation of a circular economy? While I recognize that the question is quite broad, I'm thinking maybe one of you or all of you can provide actual examples of circularity that are already happening in Romania, maybe beyond what Damian's organization is doing, things that you may be aware of.
I'll be happy to answer that if I may. I would say definitely. We have the technology and we have the knowledge. We just need to have the will, and sometimes the will has to come with maybe even some legal requirements. I'm a little bit more skeptical on the actual requirements from the Romanian consumers as of now. I think this is just on the rise, but it's not there yet in order to, I don't know, launch a boycott type of action against companies who decide to stay in the let's say the old ways of doing things. Nevertheless, I do believe this is increasing. The public pressure is increasing, but for the time being, my main concern is that circular economy should be incentivized by more legal framework. We have lots of examples of circular economy. Circular economy is just a fancy name for basically reducing waste. So the companies have done already quite a few of that. You see, for example, beverage companies reducing the amount of plastic they use in packaging, or switching from plastic to aluminum, or even to in some extent to refillables. So there are lots of things happening. Definitely we're doing a very poor job in measuring and reporting on those, which is also something that if we talk about any sort of changes, albeit circular economy, our topic today, or anything else, if you don't measure it, you cannot manage it. So data is of essence, and I think we're not doing not even close to enough in providing this data and using this data and providing it further to the industries for them to use it as a benchmark and so on.
Okay, thank you for that, Raul. Damien, anything to add from your experience?
No, I completely agree with everything what Raul was saying. It is possible. There is a capacity. There are endless possibilities to handle waste properly in Romania. In our experience, for the past 14 years, we have not received, I think, €1 from public incentives in general. Apart from CSR activities, which is actually taxes that are redirected from companies, and this is thanks to this that we survive at the moment. But no, I think on the public incentives, a lot more can be done to change the country.
Thank you for that. We also have a remark from Mr. McNear here, giving us an example of Deptford in South London, where waste is burned to create electricity. Hopefully, we'll see some of those means implemented in Romania in an efficient manner soon. And we have another question which actually circles back to what Raul said, that the consumer doesn't yet have a strong enough voice. Are there any educational initiatives in Romania to promote waste management and the circular economy in schools and high schools? Have you heard of any such initiatives, or are you participating or organizing workshops for students and young ones? Or do you think there is space for us all to try and get involved in the educational space around this topic?
Okay, let me take that one. It's key. It's definitely key. If we don't start there, nothing is going to happen. And very little, too little is happening at the moment in Romania. I've got 3 kids and I can see their friends trashing in the street, plastic things and whatever. There's still a lot to do in that field. Again, it has to be some kind of Ministry of Education behind it at one point. There are some punctual NGO initiatives which are to be lauded, and congratulations to any of this initiative, and they need to be promoted further, but it's only the beginning. That's at least my point of view. We're very far from what we can see in Western Europe on that field. Yeah,
thank you. Like Raul said in the beginning, we can feel it and we can smell it most of the time.
I would like to add something. In terms of number of initiatives, there are plenty. In terms of impact at a systemic level, it's very, very far from enough. Both because the central authorities, the guys who can implement systemic changes at national level are not necessarily enoughly involved. But also there is another detail which is extremely important. If the school itself as an institution is not an example of good practices when it comes to waste management and separate collection at source and stuff like that, any message you give to the kids is quite difficult to be trusted by them. So I think we need to turn the schools first into examples of sustainability, and then all the messages that will go further will be easily adopted as well as experienced.
Thank you for that, Raul. Completely agree that education is the base for change, and I think education regarding sustainability and circularity should not focus solely on how we can reduce, because that can sound very strange to the consumer's ear. I have to give up something, whereas the shift in the mindset should be towards we are gaining so much more in terms of health, economy, and a good way and a positive way of living. Now we have another comment in the chat here from Mr. Roshu. What about transforming production waste into briquettes to offer it to schools for heating purposes? Raul, I see you're already typing an answer, so you might as well just answer it at verbis, if you will.
If I'm allowed to intervene, I think about what you're telling earlier, the change in the mindset should be from thinking of waste as a garbage to thinking of waste as a resource. And one way of achieving this type of initiatives, like the one related to maybe doing that by transforming into briquettes and heating and so on, stays in selective collection of waste, for which both the infrastructure and the mindset of the population and the services that the operators are provided are quite poor in Romania at this moment. So we can see that even in places where you have separate dumpsters for food waste, for plastic, for aluminum, the operator simply comes and puts everything in a same container, as it's cheaper to do that. Out of which, how much would be actually reselected at its facility remains a question mark. So as long as you do not have clear circuits on types of products and so on, from one end to another, it's quite difficult to transform, let's say, waste from garbage into a resource.
Thank you for your intervention, Cleopatra. If there is anything else, Damien or Raul would like to add to that. Okay, so I assume everyone was quite well satisfied with Cleopatra's answer. I see that we have no more questions incoming in the chat or via the Q&A. Maybe one last question from me would be, what can we as individuals do more? I think there is always something that each of us can do better. But what do you think would be one high impact activities that individual persons can take to actually accelerate this change?
Okay, let me start then. I think one important action is to buy local, simply. Not directly circular economy related, but buy as local as possible. I was mentioning the vegetables earlier on, that we grow your own vegetables. Yeah. There was one action in your garden, grow your vegetables, and at least that will be a lot. We talked about reduce, but that's a positive action. You'll feel good about it, and with no impact. Yeah.
That's a very good point, Damien, and thank you for that. I think the imperative of producing and consuming local was also brought to the forefront by the pandemic in 2020 and 2021. As we have seen a lot of pain and suffering in different supply chains, which obviously tells us a clear message that some scientists have been telling us for years: we need to shorten them. So thank you for reminding us of that, Damien. If there are no more questions or comments from our guests, I would like to thank them for taking the time. Please, Raul.
I have something. What each of us can do is ask the local authorities at least to abide by the law. They are required by law to provide selective collection infrastructure, to provide pay-as-you-throw tariffs for the collection services. They are not doing that because it's quiet. So ask them at least to observe and act based on the existing legislation, and we'll all move forward a little bit.
Thank you for that. Again, a very good piece of advice, Raul. Everyone who's experienced interaction with the local authorities knows exactly what Raul is talking about, and I completely agree with his suggestion. With that being said, I would like to thank all of our guests for speaking to us today. Thank you to all the participants and the insightful questions posed. And as Anna said in the beginning, please keep a close eye on BRCC events during this year. We are committed to spreading the word on sustainability, ESG, and the circular economy. And we look forward to providing a platform where we can share knowledge and hopefully drive the mission forward. Wishing everyone here a good weekend, and asking everyone to send a good thought to our neighbors in Ukraine who are now facing a tremendous issue, because we cannot have a truly sustainable future if we do not have peace in the first place. Thank you, everyone, and have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.